Hello and welcome to another episode of Gaffer and Gear. In this episode we're going to be looking at the light panels Gemini 1x1 Hard, which is their new light. So the difference between this and other panels that they've made is this has a lensed array which gives you a very tight spot. So this thing has an amazing amount of firepower. Now in the video we're also going to be comparing this in its flood mode with its dome accessory versus an Arri Sky Panel S30. Alright, so before we get underway, just the usual disclaimers. Light Panels did send me this product and I do get to keep it, but they have no editorial control over the episode. Now, in terms of what you get, this thing costs $2,250 roughly. You get the light for that, you get the stirrup, you get a power supply which mounts to the stirrup. The power supply can also mount to the unit, and you get two diffusers. So you get this dome diffuser, which will give you roughly about a 170 degree spread, very, very even light. And you also get this light diffuser. All right, so let's do a very quick run through of what's on the light. Okay, so it's a 200 watt RGBWW light. So that might be a bit hard to believe with how small it is. Okay, so we've got the on-off switch down here. Now you've got a green light above that. If you're running it off battery and your battery's starting to get flat and the light's about to turn off, that will flash red, and you also get a warning on the display. So you've got your three main adjustment knobs here. Now on the back, you've got a cancel button. So this knob here is your menu button. So you press that down to go into your menu. And if you want to get out of the menu option that you're in, you just hit the cancel button. The next buttons up top are your presets. So the presets have two modes. So you've got an A/B selector over here. Okay, so it'll let you know if you've got A or B selected. B is your Kelvin presets, so your quick selections. So you've got 2,700, 3,200, 4,000, 5,000, 5,600 and 6,000 Kelvin. Now if you select A for the top light here, then these are your user presets. So you can actually save your settings into memory. So if you want to save, all you do is hold down the button and then it'll save. So it'll tell you it's done it. And if you want to recall, you just press the buttons to recall. So just a quick press to recall and a long press to save. So very, very straightforward. Okay, in the top you have your control inputs. So we've got DMX 5-pin in and out, and we've got the smaller ones. I think they're called Cat 9. They look like a telephone cable. You've also got a comms port in here. So this is a modular port, so you can buy as an optional extra a lumen radio module or a Bluetooth module. You've also got an antenna port here. The unit comes with an antenna. I just can't remember where I put it. And that's for your Wi-Fi. So I think that's for phone app. That last time I checked, that wasn't released yet. And also underneath here is your USB port for your firmware updates, and the USB port will power a lumen radio receiver if you're using one of those. Now on the back of the light here, you've got 8 threading points in the corners. Now those threading points are not for rigging, so they can take a spigot. It's no good for rigging because it's so close to here that you can't actually get a clamp on. Those threads are actually just nuts that are held in place by the plastic, so they're not held in strong enough to rig or take any weight. But what those points are for is linking multiple units together. You can also, for example, mount accessories like the power supply or the battery mount to the side of the unit. Now speaking of battery power, the unit is powered via the 3-pin XLR inlet on the side here, so you do have quite a few battery options. Now one battery option they do sell is this plate that will mount to here or mount to the actual light itself. So let's take a look at that. Now with this, you can take your AC power that's coming off your power supply, and you can loop that through the battery plate and then into the light. So if you're running the light, even at full power, you can attach your battery. So we're running off mains power, attach the battery. And if your mains power gets disconnected, it'll switch over to battery power. Now the light can be removed from the stirrup, The light by itself weighs just a little over 3 kilograms. Now this whole setup here with the light, the stirrup, the power supply and the battery plate only comes in at about 6 kilograms. Alright, so let's fire this up and run it with its different diffusers and have a look at the different beam angles and different characteristics of the light. Alright, so when you run it with no diffuser on, you get a 47-degree beam angle and a massive amount of intensity. So at a distance of 3 meters set to daylight, I was getting 2,860 lux out of this thing. That is a lot of firepower for a 1x1 panel. Now, the interesting thing with this is you do get multiple shadowing because it's all individual light sources. Particularly in your HSI mode, that can be exaggerated because of the way the LED emitters are spread for the color emitters. But the way they've got the color emitters spread, it seems to have very, very little color fraying on the edges. So let's take a look. Right, so as you can see, a very intense beam, and on the edge of the beam there, very little color fraying. Even as I go through my CCTs, very little color fraying on that beam edge. And even if I go through my color modes, very little fraying. So what I mean by fraying is it's the same color off to the edge of the beam. So that's very unusual for any light with an open array. That's an intense spotted open array. Now, the multiple shadowing, okay, what you'd expect from a multiple array LED light source. Now, your next option for diffusion is to put the light diffusion in. So the light diffusion is lightly frosted. So there's just enough frosting there that it'll merge or blend all of the light emitters together and give you a singular light source in your CCT mode. So I'll just point that out, in the CCT mode. So let's take a look. So we're now back to that solid one soft shadow, so we don't have multiple light sources. Now in your color mode, particularly if you're using a red or a blue, the pattern of the color emitters can still give you multiple shadowing. Now if we put the dome diffuser on, that'll give enough space between the LED emitters and the panel here that we will get one clean light source. Now the other advantage with the dome is it gives you a roughly 170-degree beam spread. So 170-degree beam spread, 200 watts RGB, that's very similar to the sky panel here. So let's do a comparison of the two. Now set to 3,200 degrees Kelvin tungsten, the light panels comes in at 5% brighter than the Arri. Set to 5,600 Kelvin, the light panels comes in at 22% brighter than the Arri. Running the green emitters, the light panels comes in at 23% brighter than the Arri. Now with the blue emitters, the Arri actually comes in at 20% brighter than the light panels. Now this is where things get really interesting. Set to primary red, the Arri is 77% brighter than the light panels. So in CCT mode, the light panel is brighter than the Arri, but in HSI mode, the Arri can be, with a lot of the colors, brighter than the light panel. Now let's go through what I think are negatives with this light, and there's not that many, but the first two are self-inflicted. So what I mean by that is if the light didn't have these features, I wouldn't even call them negatives. It wouldn't come up on my radar. So the first negative is the special effects. The special effects are really average. And the next negative for me is if you run this off batteries, it does have a battery monitor. Now this battery monitor is only compatible with Anton Bauer batteries, so they did send me this battery for the review. Now here's the problem. A fully charged battery on the light set to daylight running at 100% brightness, the battery monitor will tell you that you'll get 54 or 52 minutes of runtime. Now the light will shut down with about 20 minutes left on the clock. The next negative is a temporary one. You can remove the light from its stirrup. So it's about half the weight when you do this. So let's say, for example, I want to mount this out on a C-stand arm as a backlight in this lightweight configuration. How do I mount it? There's no rigging points on it. So I had a look at the Light Panels website, and there is no accessories that go into these slots for mounting. So I asked Light Panels if they were planning to make anything, and they sent me back this diagram. So they are working on a baby pin that can come out the sides for rigging. Before we go into the positives with this light, I'm just going to cover a few things that I think you should check with the unit when it comes back from a rental or comes back from somebody borrowing it from you. All right, so how do I know to check for these things? Well, whoever had this for testing before me is one of those unfortunate individuals that has the ability to damage everything they touch. All right, so the first thing I'd be checking is that the lugs here, which you loosen to remove the light from the stirrup, I would check that your Allen key still fits, okay? Because whoever had this before me used the incorrect gauged Allen keys. So this lug's okay, but they managed to completely strip the lug on this side. Now the next thing is when they put the light back onto the stirrup, they put it on facing the wrong way around. All right, so when you get one of these back from a borrow or from a rental, just check. So just very gently, just tilt the light and check that there's a lot of clearance here between the buttons and the power supply. Because if it's put on backwards, the buttons will hit the leading edge of the power supply here. So when I got this, I couldn't tilt it with the power supply on. The buttons were touching the power supply. And when I got it, I couldn't believe the damage to the buttons. So the buttons had been smacked into the power supply, you know, with quite a bit of force, quite a bit of effort. And the icing on the cake, the next thing he or she did is they dropped it. And they dropped it from a fairly big height. So how do I know this? They bent the lock off. Okay, so here's my advice to anyone that does rentals. You want to have a spare lock off, because of the probably 24 spare parts lock-offs that I own. Light Panels has a unique thread. None of the others fitted, so make sure you keep a spare lock-off. Now let's get into the positives. And this light has a feature that has totally blown me away. Let's say you've rented this out to somebody or somebody's borrowed it. It's come back and you want to check that it's okay. All right, so you go into Menu, you go into Settings, you go into System, and then you go into System Utilities, and it has a System Test. So you click on System Test. The first thing it does is it asks you to press all the buttons to make sure they're working. Then it asks you to put values into all the individual knobs to check that they're working properly. And then it does a full diagnostic sweep of the light engine and the cooling fan. So it runs all of the drivers individually and all of the drivers in combinations to see if there's any problems. Now the next positive for me is clearly this thing has been thoroughly tested before it got sent to me. So what I mean by that is if you buy this, you can take it straight on set. Okay, you're not going to have a problem. So I'll just clarify what I mean, just explain what I mean by that. You're not going to be sitting on set thinking, oh geez, I can't wait for the next firmware update because the fan's too loud. Or I wish I could use this thing properly over DMX. I can't wait for the next firmware update to get working DMX profiles. You don't have to deal with any of that crap. This thing is ready to take on set. So it's the first light I've had come in for review that is complex. And by complex, I mean 2,700 to 10,000 Kelvin CCT range, tracking the Planckian curve with plus minus green capability, HSI color modes, gels libraries, all of that stuff. It is the first one that's come in that I would be willing to take straight from shooting the review and put into my truck, okay, and take on a job tomorrow. It's the first one I've come across where it will do that. A lot of the other lights sit on the shelves here, waiting for the next firmware update before I take them on a job. The next positive for me is the cooling system. It is so quiet. This is the first light that I would take on set that's fan cooled, and I'd actually leave the fan in automatic mode. There's a low noise mode where you can turn the fan off. Waste of menu space. You're never ever going to need to turn the fan off. It is that quiet. Now, if you can hear fan noise, it is actually a Forza 200. That's about 1.5 meters away from me. That light 1.5 meters away is louder than this one here. So let's just have a listen. All right, so let's have a look through the menu system, and there's quite a few little gems in here hidden for professional users. All right, so on the display first up in the top corner there, it tells you what mode you're running in. So we're CCT mode. It tells you that the fans are running in auto. It gives you an indication of how hot the light is, and the little lightning strike is your power indicator. So if that comes up red, it means you've got a battery fault. Okay, down the bottom it tells you what control mode you're in. So we're in local control, so I can operate it from here, and it's telling me that the fan's on. Now to get into the menu system, you just press the button down here, and you can scroll up and down your items. So the first thing is your CCT mode, which is your white light mode. All right, you can adjust your kelvins in 10 Kelvin increments. Hold on, I'm on the wrong button here. There we go. 10 Kelvin increments. So you've got a lot of tunability with this unit. So I'm just going to use a correct term here. I'm going to show that I pay attention to when engineers send me messages. Okay, this control system is high resolution. So there you go. Now, so very, very fine control over your CCT, and you can also adjust your brightness in 0.1 increments. So I think this is very important because this is quite a small light, so physically. So you might use it in a small location, but running this thing at 100% brightness, it would be far too bright. So if you ran it at something like 10% brightness, let's get that down a bit lower. At 10% brightness, and if you are operating it between 0 and 10%, you've still got 100 increments of adjustment. So you've got plenty of tunability in there. And you've also got your plus minus green control, okay, so which goes in full 100% increments. Now let's go back to our menu system. So press menu. The next thing down is our color modes. So click on the color modes, we get all our color options. So we've got our HSI mode, so we'll have a look at that first. All right, so HSI mode, you've got your saturation. The knobs are in a different position to Arri, so I keep turning the wrong knobs. Okay, so your saturation is adjustable in 100% increments. Okay, and the brightness is adjustable in 0.1% increments. And your color hue, of course, 360 color hues. Now, if you want to tune your desaturation a bit more, what you can do is go back to your menu system, go to your color mode, and you can scroll down here to your HSI saturation curve. And you can set that to either logarithmic or linear. So to give you an idea of the difference between the two, pretty much every light is logarithmic. So if you set this to linear, 50% will look more like what you expect 25% to look like. The next thing is the gels mode in the color modes. So you can select Gemini original gels, Roscoe type gels, or Lee type gels. So let's click on Lee type gels. Okay, so we've got a choice of all the different filters. Got correction, color filters, 600, cosmetic, and 700 series. Let's click on 700. All right, let's turn our brightness up, and we'll turn off the other lights in the room. All right, so you can select your gel, and it gives you the gel number and also the name, so that's handy. So it makes it easy to find the gel you're looking for. Now you can also hard switch between daylight and tungsten. So you can't choose a CCT, you can only hard switch between the two. Now the next mode is your RGBW mode. So I was a bit surprised by this. I was just expecting 4 sliders. So let's pop in and have a look. So you can adjust your Kelvin. So you can set your white point at which you desaturate to, okay? And then you can adjust by pressing the button here on your dimmer. You can adjust your white level, which is happening down here. Click across, adjust your red levels, your green levels, and your blue levels. So adjustable white, red, green, and blue. All right, so I've gone back to the main menu. So I've had a look at our color modes. Next down is the effects mode. I'm not going to bother with that. I reckon it's pretty ordinary. Okay, underneath that is your DMX Fast Selector. So if you want to select your DMX mode in a hurry, this is where you go. So your DMX profile. Okay, so as you can see there, we've got 18 DMX profiles. So excellent. So let's go back to our menu. Okay, next down is Apollo mode. I don't know a lot about that. I think it's some sort of base station that uses RDM that's made for light panels. So I don't know a lot about that. Underneath here is settings. So that's the last thing in the menu. So let's go into there. You've got your input-output settings. So that's where you select things like whether you're wired, DMX, RDM, all that sort of stuff. So let's go back out of there. Next down is your DMX settings. So let's get into there. Now it says DMX version. So DMX version means your DMX profile. Okay, so let's click on there. We've got original, gels mode, CCT RGBW, and your CCT HSI. They're your versions that are in there. Okay, let's go back by pressing the cancel button. Your DMX resolution, that's whether you're 8-bit or 16-bit. Your DMX address, that's pretty straightforward. You can select your fan modes over the DMX. Wireless DMX, so we need the module for that to activate that part of the menu system. And your DMX mode control, so that's enable, disable. I'm not sure what that does. I haven't had a real big play with it, to be quite honest with you. And underneath here is a little thing that's missing from a lot of lights, DMX termination. So if you're looping your DMX cables through, so in and out of the light, the last one in series you want to set as your termination or terminate, so that the signal doesn't bounce back down the line and create interference. So that's something that a lot of lights I wish had. Okay, next down is your fan settings. So you've got quite a few options in here, fan on, fan off, delayed, set it to maximum. All seriousness, I just run this in auto. It is so quiet, I don't think you need to bother with this menu. The fan's awesome. LCD display, so you can set your brightness. USB, so this is a little gem. So you can store your settings, so all your saves, you can actually transfer to a USB stick. So you can store your settings, store your presets, restore your settings, restore your presets, and of course firmware update. So it's very cool that you might have a look that you like and save it on a USB stick for another day. So that's pretty cool. Okay, and underneath here is system. System's got a few little gems in it. System info, so that gives you your firmware RDM information, so pretty straightforward. Next up is your system monitor, so it tells you what your current draws are and things like that. The one thing I find interesting here is the fan RPMs. This fan is spinning at 901 RPM, all right? How cool is that? That is a really good fan. Okay, next down is your system defaults, so you can do a system restore at this point if you need to. This is something that should be in all lights, particularly if you're renting them out. It is handy to be able to do a factory reset when they come back, so I wish some of my other lights had that. System utility, so that's where we've got the system test. You can calibrate your FX. I don't know quite what that does. I've run it a few times and I can't see any difference. And underneath that is your manufacturer's tests. I don't understand this menu and I can't get around in it, but I figure that's because I'm not meant to. Okay, so I think it's best to stay out of there. So that's a menu run through, quite a comprehensive little package. All right, let's talk about running this unit off batteries. So you've got quite a few options because you've got a 3-pin XLR inlet. Now, the one thing I do want to point out is it does have a typo on it. So it says 13 to 33 volts DC. That should be 13 to 34 volts. Okay, so if you've got two 14.8 volt V mounts linked together, that's more than 33 volts. Okay, it's 33.5 volts, something like that. You can safely run two of those together and power this light. It won't be a problem. I've done it and I've checked with their engineers. Okay, now let's talk about running it off a single battery. You can use a 26 volt battery or a 14.4 or a 14.8. Now, if you've got any experience with running 200 watt lights off V-mount batteries, you are instantly worried about this. Okay, so I'll explain what has gone wrong for me in the past with 200 watt lights running off a single V-mount. And that is the pins here are only really rated at 15 amps. Okay, now these ones are higher rated because they're gold plated. Okay, but here's the problem, the plating wears off. So after about a year or 6 months, you'll start getting the plastic around the pins melting. And I've had batteries that I can't remove from plates because they've melted together. So 200 watts running off a single V-mount battery, not a great idea, but you don't have a problem with this system with doing that. It's not going to happen. It's not going to melt down. And here's why. Here's the simple solution they've come up with. This doesn't actually run at full power off a single 14.4 or 14.8 volt battery. It doesn't run at full power. I've metered it. It only runs at 92% brightness. Now, even at 92% brightness, you're probably a bit worried that when the battery gets flat and it's down to 12 volts just before it switches off, that's still too much amperage over the pins. Well, when the battery is flat, the light isn't running at that 92% brightness level anymore. It's dropped another 8%. Okay, so if you're running it off a single battery, it is not going to run at full power. It's 8% less bright than running it off mains power. And then at the end of the battery life, it's going to be a further 8% less bright. So let me just clarify all that. So this is what I found with my metering as I've tested it. If you run it off two 14.4 or 14.8 volt V-mount batteries running in series, the light will run at a consistent full brightness. If you're running it off a 26 volt battery, through my metering, I've discovered that it runs the light at a consistent full brightness. It is only if you're running it off a 14.4 or 14.8 volt single battery that it doesn't run at full brightness and that the brightness goes down over a period of time. So again, this would be to protect the battery investment. The other thing I found through testing is that if you have a battery that is older and not really capable of running the light anymore, or you've got a battery that is a lower watt hour battery and you really shouldn't be using it to power the light will detect it and it will shut down before the battery does. So in all of my testing, at no point did I trip a battery. The light would shut down first and indicate on the display that it was a battery issue. Now before we get into the DMX, there's just something I want to mention. The HSI mode on this, that's your color mode, the hue, saturation, intensity mode, it desaturates to 5,351 Kelvin, that's what I've metered, if you're operating it manually. So it desaturates to daylight only. Now if you're running it over DMX, you can dial in a CCT, a plus minus green value on top of that, and then saturate in your color. Okay, so over the DMX, it does have a bit more capability than it does manually. So it's got proper DMX profiling. All right, so let's fire up the light. Now what we're going to test first is a CCT sweep. So we're going to go from 2,700 Kelvin up to 10,000 Kelvin over 5 seconds. So let's just have a look at how smooth it does that transition. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Let's sweep back the other way now at 2.5 seconds, and off we go. So CCT transitions are pretty smooth. Let's go down to 1 second. All right, now let's put in 5,600 Kelvin. And what we're going to do now is we're going to fade it to black. So let's do that over 5 seconds. Let's have a look. Okay, let's fade up. Now it's not as smooth as say a Sky panel or an Astera product, but you know it's better than most. So let's have a look at 2.5 seconds and fading down. So it's a little bit jerky towards the end, like most DMX lights, a little bit jerky at the end. Let's go down to 1 second now. All right, now let's go to 5,600 Kelvin, and we're going to add in a color hue. So we're going to swing across to a color hue over 5 seconds. So that's pretty smooth. Let's go back the other way. All right, so if you want to do a subtle scene change, you can do it with this unit over 5 seconds. Let's try the same thing at 2.5 seconds. So a little bit jerky, but not bad. And let's try the same thing again over 1 second. Now, just to clarify everything, I am running 8-bit profiling, and I am doing it over Lumen radio. Okay, so let's finish off by going through all the data I've collected. All right, so in terms of flicker, I can't get any flicker on this. So no matter what shutter speed I've taken photos at and shot at, I can't seem to get any flicker out of it. All right, now let's go through brightness. So set to 3200 Kelvin at a distance of 3 meters with no diffuser, I got 2440 lux. With the light diffuser, I got 1900 lux, and with the dome, I got 720 lux. Now set to 5600 Kelvin, I got 2860 lux with no diffuser, 2300 lux with the light diffuser, and with the dome I got 879 lux. Now running the red emitter only with no diffuser, I got 254 lux, with the light diffuser I got 205 lux, and with the dome I got 81 lux. The green emitters only with no diffuser, I got 1140 lux. With the light diffuser, I got 774 lux, and with the dome diffuser, I got 265 lux. Now, with the blue emitters only, with no diffuser, I got 200 lux. With the light diffuser, 136 lux, and with the dome, I got 50 lux. Now, let's go over the brightness levels when running off a single V-mount battery. At a distance of 3 meters set to 5600 Kelvin, I got 2240 lux with the battery fully charged. Now just before the battery died, before it went completely flat, I got 2050 lux. Now let's take a look at our CCT accuracies. Below 3000 Kelvin, it is typically accurate to plus 10 Kelvin. Between 3000 and 4000 Kelvin, its average accuracy is plus 24 Kelvin. Between 4000 and 5000 Kelvin, it is accurate to typically plus or minus 13 Kelvin. And between 5000 and 6000 Kelvin, it is out by, on average, minus 76 Kelvin. Now let's have a look at the TM30 color vector scores. Between 2700 Kelvin and 4300 Kelvin, this unit scored 93. Between 4350 Kelvin and 6000 Kelvin, the unit scored 94. Now let's have a look at our white point accuracy measured in delta UV. At 2700 Kelvin, right down at its base Kelvin, it was out by minus 0.0024, which means it is pink by roughly the equivalent of a 1/8 correction gel. Then as you dial up your Kelvins, it very quickly gets back up to the Planckian curve. By 2950 Kelvin, it was out by minus 0.0009 delta UV. Between 3000 and 4000 Kelvin, it is out by typically plus or minus 0.0004 delta UV. Now that is within the accuracy of my meter, so for argument's sake, it is tracking right on the Planckian curve. Between 4000 and 5000 Kelvin, it is typically out by plus 0.0013, which means the unit is slightly green by the equivalent of what would be a 1/16 correction gel, so nothing in it. Now between 5000 Kelvin and 6000 Kelvin, it is typically out by plus 0.0011 delta UV, which again means it is ever so slightly green by less than what would be the equivalent of a 1/16 correction gel. Now let's take a closer look at some of our Kelvins, starting off with the base Kelvin of 2700. When I dialed in 2700 Kelvin, I got 2708 with a TM30 color vector score of 93%, with 101% saturation. With CRI, R6, R11 and R12 were below 90. Here is the spectrum analysis, and the delta UV score was minus 0.0024, which means at this point the light is pink by about the equivalent of a 1/8 correction gel. When I dialed in 3200 Kelvin, I got 3222 with an SSI score of 84. TM30 color vector score was 93% with 100% average saturation. With the CRI, only R12 was below 90. Here is the spectrum analysis, and the white point is very accurate with a delta UV of minus 0.0006. When I dialed in 4400 Kelvin, I got 4404 with a TM30 color vector score of 94% with 101% saturation. With the CRI scores, only R12 was below 90. Here is the spectrum analysis, and the white point was out by a delta UV score of plus 0.0011. When I dialed in 5600 Kelvin, I got 5518 with an SSI score of 73. The TN30 color vector score was 94% with 101% saturation. With the CRI scores, only R12 was below 90. Here is the spectrum analysis, and the white point is surprisingly accurate with a delta UV score of minus 0.0002. Now let's take a look at our HSI mode, starting off with a desaturated white point. Now I just want to point out that this white point is what it desaturates to when you're operating the unit manually off the back. In the DMX mode, you can desaturate to any white point. The light desaturates to 5351 Kelvin with a TN30 color vector score of 94% with 101% saturation. And the delta UV is minus 0.0016. Now let's take a look at our fully saturated primary vectors. Red, which should be 0, came in at 1 degree. Green was smack on at 120, and blue was right on the money at 240. Now let's take a look at our fully saturated secondary vectors. Yellow, which should be 60, came in at 67. Cyan, which should be 180, came in at 209. And magenta, which should be 300, came in at 256. Now let's take a look at our color vectors desaturated to 50%. Red came in at 0 with 40% saturation. Green came in at 117 degrees with 60% saturation. Blue came in at 240 degrees with 72% saturation. Now let's take a look at our desaturated secondary colors. Yellow came in at 66 degrees with 67% saturation. Cyan came in at 207 degrees with 79% saturation. And magenta came in at 257 degrees with 75% saturation. Alright, that's another gear review done. I think you'll agree this is a very impressive unit, particularly for the price, its size and its weight. I'm Andrew Locke, see you on the next episode of Gaffer and Gear.